Man, this
All right.
question I just got asked in the chat's really interesting. I don't even know how to answer this, but we should try because it sounds fun. How do you train yourselves to listen to music without being distracted, especially with all the ADD we all have? Um, we all don't have ADD, would be the first thing. And music, for someone that I might have some of it, that's what's supposed to mitigate that. I mean, it takes you to another world. It displaces you from that anxiety and it gives you something to, imagine, right? Like that's the best songwriters speak words that we don't have for ourselves, right? That's the whole
I
point.
can I have a version of an answer to this, which
Uh-huh.
different than your interpretation and maybe different than they're asking. I've noticed that I'm about to go into a month's worth of writing sessions, and in addition to writing a song every day when I was on quarantine, I wanted to kind of like get my head in the game. Obviously, I'm jet lagged, and I'm not now, but adjusting to the time difference. And I often am putting on podcasts as background
Hmm.
noise, as I think a lot of us do. And I've had to go, wait, let me put on a playlist of music. Let me put on the 27 years of hits playlist that I talked about a bit on my
Yep.
story before, which is just like, top 10 on media base, the pop radio in the US for the last 27 or 28 years, just putting on music, making a deliberate choice that I'm going to have music happening rather than defaulting to some podcast with information that I think is going to be interesting or important. Although you still do some of that, but making deliberate choices of changing your diet, changing
Yep.
what you input into your brain, having also deliberately having times without input so I can let my brain kind of explore. And if I'm listening to a lot of music and I'm writing a song every day and then I turn all the inputs off, so no podcast, no YouTube videos, no nothing, my brain starts writing songs, or writing little notes
Yeah.
or singing little melodies or thinking about a song I love and I've got melodies going on in my head. I think that, talking about and referencing the part where it says, we got ADD brains now. I think a part of that is we have so much available brain diet, and it's all very sugary. It's all very ephemeral. It's all very thin. And if we can make deliberate decisions, I know it works for me, and I know you and I have talked about it, making deliberate decisions about what we input into our brain and
Yeah.
into our ears, makes a huge difference. So my routine in the morning is I don't have any inputs for the first 30 minutes. I write in a journal, then I meditate, and then I look at my messages and see what I need to tend to. But while I've been here
Yeah.
in London, the next thing I do is I put on this hits playlist that I like, and it goes from Boys to Men to Bon Jovi to Eminem to The Weeknd, and I put it on shuffle. But all of a sudden, I'm just getting
Sick.
great songs in my head, and that really changes how I output from there. So
Yeah.
maybe that's
No,
an answer to
I
it.
love that you took it there. I could have done that as well. I love that point of view, all of it. I
Yeah.
completely agree with everything you're saying. I also love what Jared Masters is just saying. Be distracted by it, understand what distracts you, step back and listen to it as a whole after you consciously listen to what distracts you. It's really interesting because Yoel is asking something specific, like not following an arrangement, not being able to follow the arrangement. Well, you're going to follow a different part of the arrangement, right? You're going to always hear something different. That's the beauty of music and ear candy, right? You're never going to hear the same thing twice. If you do, then the production's not right because there's no magic in there. Then it's just like blocked out. That's kind of what we get into about how to make, or how what I get into about how to make loop-based pop music feel like it actually has a journey because you're just
Mm.
blocking out, muting things, coming back in with the same thing. Sometimes the beat never changes and just the lyric changes. There's a lot to get distracted by because I mean, I, look, there's there's a lot of other inputs that we can choose to partake in, and I wanted to double back on that with what you were talking about.
Mm.
The Andrew Huberman podcast, Huberman Labs podcast, has been really beneficial for me because he discusses science-based evidence for what is causing these things to distract us. And the other 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, he wasn't even talking about, a lot of people say that we're addicted to our devices, to our phones. He wasn't even thinking of it as an addiction. He was thinking of it as a nervous tick. And I thought
Mm.
that was interesting to think about the amount of times, like statistically, we all check our phones and our devices and constantly look for reward-based input. It's more reminiscent of like a Tourette's tick than an addiction. There's obviously something with dopamine and serotonin and different reward uptakes, but the tick is weird.
Mm.
And it's first off for all of us like to admit that we do it, and then think think about ways to mitigate that, I think will help kind of answer a lot of questions for just on our inputs. There's so much information for us to take in. There's so many ways to take it in, and there's a lot of great shit out there.
Yeah.
So Matt's point of view is, I'm glad you brought it to that, because I think it's a bigger problem than like, you can't listen to music, and all of us too.
Yeah.
And my quick response back to it, and the reason I brought it up, was I think music is supposed to be one of those things that takes us out of that mode. Like when you put a vinyl on, right? You look at the album cover, you're immersed in the storytelling, like who the players are on the record back in the 60s and 70s. There's a story behind it. You have to flip it over, so you kind of have to be paying a certain attention to the record in order to to even listen to music that way. So
you can't click next too. You can't fast forward.
Can't click next. I mean, you can go over, lift up the needle, search for the groove, but that's not necessarily what you're doing unless you're DJing. You're mostly listening through to vinyls. So I put together a hi-fi rig during the pandemic for this, because I was going through a similar struggle where I didn't know how to be a fan of music anymore. It's been a decade and a half or longer, a decade and a half professionally doing music, but even over 2 decades of performing and being a musician. And I was losing fanship because of modern records, and I'm not a fan of a lot of modern records. Obviously, Tyler stumps that for sure. But I want to listen to Tyler's record on vinyl. Like that was one of the first thoughts I had, was when do I get that on vinyl so I can put it on the hi-fi rig instead of the mix rig to listen to. I've only listened to it in the car because I want to be a fan of that record. I don't want to think what I could be doing otherwise. I don't want to listen to the arrangements and ripping it apart or picking it apart and thinking, oh shit, like what could I have done? I want to be a fan of this record. That is insane. There's nothing I could have done to improve that. And that's a rare thought in my brain as a music creator. I just think inputs are important, and we should all be thinking about it. You and I are not going to solve this problem, but to bring awareness to that, and thanks Andrew Huberman, because it's doing it for me too. Like my phone won't be on me for over an hour because it's either on charge or do not disturb because I'm doing something else, and I have this like ghost vibration feeling in my pants, and that's when it's like, that's not I don't know if it's an addiction. That sounds like a tick. It's like wait, what?
You're habituated to it. I mean, it's like a sugar diet or anything else where you're just used to doing it. Yeah, I've turned my phone on do not disturb. The only calls they get through are like my mom, my brother, my attorney, my manager. But everything else just goes straight to voicemail. I don't check voice. I've tried to limit a lot of that stuff. But yeah, I've also tried to do the same thing you're talking about, continue to be a fan of music. And that's why I love watching a thing like This Is Pop, or these things that feel inspiring where I get to watch somebody's process that I really admire. The first one is amazing. It's all about Boyz II Men, who are
I love Boyz II Men.
They're so underrated, and you forget like the amount of hits that they had and the way they affected the culture before the late 90s, early 2000s boy band craze. But it also just made me excited to listen to music. And so I just like put on a bunch of Boyz II Men and was like just vibing out and singing and dancing by myself. It was fucking great. Like finding more moments of that and just being like, this is possible. I can just sing some Boyz II Men and dance around in this London house. Like let's get it.
I would just wonder what it would be like for people. For me too. I'm not, we should also say that I do these things with you and the other podcasts for the community, but I also do it for myself, right? I want to be more picky about my inputs. I want to be more understanding of when I need to put the phone away for hours, whatever. I want to be more self-aware of the things that distract. And I do notice, because, Apple gives you a little screen time. The weeks where I'm like killing it and inspired in work, my shit is down 50+%.
Yep.
Like I'm locked in, and then maybe I'm going out to dinner, right? And I'm not gonna look at my phone when I'm out to dinner. So when I'm zoomed in, zoned in, whatever, in the flow, whatever people want to call this place of creativity, I don't look at it as much because I don't need the extra inputs, because I'm getting so satiated by the creative process, by the people around me. And then there are times where it's up 60% and I'm like not as happy.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And I just notice it. I don't really love Instagram, right? Like but like on it by default, right? On it for work, on it to connect with humans. I don't really like it, right? Like, just to be real, but I still do it, and that's confusing to me. And
Yeah.
that's something deeply human, because there is some reward structure there. But I'm at my best when I'm not doing it as much. When I notice it's like at a couple of hours per day instead, and I think that's it's just something to be more mindful of.
Yeah, and I love what you said too, and we've talked about it a little bit before, but I do this. I mean, the impetus for this was we were all on lockdown, and I
Mm,
miss being in the studio talking to my friends about making records, because a huge part
right.
of writing sessions or mixing or whatever is the hang. The hang is
Yeah.
hugely important, not just for the quality of the work, but for the quality of our emotional state and all that. So we started doing these because we didn't have a regular way to communicate. And I was, you and I were talking offline back in last March or whatever it was, and being like, let's just go live and have the kind of conversations we'd have in the studio. This is the kind of stuff we'd talk about. And
Yeah.
so I
Right.
think, and when there's young record makers that are like, how do I get my big break, or should I move here, do this? Do whatever you can to just be around people that inspire you to make more music. Because you and I talking about the docu-series I just watched, or the Tyler record, which I've been obsessed with. Now I'm going to go listen to it more tonight. I've listened to it 5 or 6 times all the way through. And I was just talking to
Yeah.
someone else about it today or on Instagram, and saw someone in person last night. We were talking about it, and now we're talking about it. And it gets me excited about making music. And
Yeah.
fundamentally,
Yeah.
that's one of the hardest things to sustain, especially in a time when we're isolated and far away from each other, is the ability to just talk and get excited about music. So
Yeah.
I'm all about it.